Okay, and with that, we're moving on to our final speaker for this event. He is yet another veteran in the industry. Let's welcome Mr. Cash. With over 18 years of experience in the industry, he has had hands-on experience in setting up global PMO from the ground up. He is a certified portfolio and program management professional with experiences in diversified industries. Welcome to the program, Cash. How are you?
Hey everyone. Hey, thank you very much for the introductions. Appreciate it. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Loud and clear? All right. Is there anything else you want me to add to that, Kritika, or should we get started?
If there's anything you would like the audience to know about you, we are more than happy to receive it.
Yep, no, I think you did a great job, short and sweet. So yes, my background is project management and analysis work, basically. I have 18 years of experience in the industry. I was doing independent contract work up until recently. And I now have a small business that goes by the name ZebraEdge, and which is what I run out of New York City. So that being said, I can share my screen. We could go through the slides. I do understand that we have half an hour, right? And then the remaining 10 minutes for questions and answers. Make sense? All right. Let me see if I can share. All right. Kritika, if you can confirm for me, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
All right. Hey everyone, I know it's a global event. Folks are here online from all over the world, I believe. So sorry for having you guys on in the evenings or nights if you're on the east side. I am speaking from New York City, where I have been since '08. So when I was approached by the team to speak, I was deciding on a subject, and I haven't spoken on this particular subject, the success of a project in any events. But as a project manager, program leader, whenever I work for a client, for any of our end customers, internally, there's a lot of discussion about what makes a project successful, right? So if they are in the audience, if you have individuals who are a project manager, scrum master, or any kind of a leader who owns the deliverable of a technology solution, you may have run into this kind of discussion internally, right? I'm assuming yes. So I decided to speak on this subject for one reason. I had not openly discussed about this in an event like this. Number two, I wanted to see, what the audience reception is going to be. And it also gave me some chance for a few hours to look into this and what items to discuss, how to approach the subject, and be able to give my real examples of different industries and organizations where I have worked, where an audience thought that the project actually failed. Then there was another set of the audience that thought that, no, it was really good. We did meet the end results of what the project was asking for. So that being said, let me just move on. So I want to jump right into some real examples. I don't know if this is an interactive session where folks can ask questions immediately, but at least I can speak to it. Example A, which I have, is in an organization, a project that had 85 use cases defined upfront before we started even writing codes or solutioning it. 85 use cases were defined. It wasn't user stories, remember, it's use cases. A year and a half was used up on implementing and executing those use cases. $1.85 million was used up, but only 11 or 12 use cases were truly executed or completed. That's about 14% of the use cases. So my question, not question, I don't know, you can't answer because you are on mute. something to think about is how would an organization look at this project and whether they would consider that to be a success or a failure. The project was considered a success. And the reason is the end goal, the end objective of what we were trying to do, we were still able to meet. The additional use cases was more of an add-on to make a user experience really great, which wasn't really a core of what we were trying to develop. But still, the team definitely had a concession in the end to admit that, hey, look, we were able to meet the MVP. If you are from an agile world and if you have been doing Scrum and understand the phrasing of MVP, then you will realize when I say the MVP of the core was completed and we were able to go live. There was an audience in this company that did not think the project was successful because they were looking more from a quantity perspective rather than the quality perspective. Example B, a transformational initiative. We spent 2 years of work, $35 million, and these are real numbers, by the way. So that's why I would not identify the name of the company or the organization. Now, here the initiative was scrapped. That 30% of the $35 million was reused because we could salvage it. So if I were to ask the audience the questions, whether this initiative was a success or a failure, the answer is pretty easy. It was a failure. And the reason is that the end goal of the project was never accomplished, whether it was X number of use cases or user stories. It's just that what we wanted to achieve at the end of the day, we could not because the initiative was scrapped. And the reason why I have identified here that 30% was reused, because there were content and videos and education. This was an educational industry, by the way. So if you're in high school, you're moving on to an undergrad, there was some coursework that you could take from us. So quite a few of the $35 million was used in creating content. Now that content was reused in a different system, different application, but as a technology solution itself, it was scrapped and the project did not move ahead to begin with. So this is an easy example, but just to give you guys an idea of what I consider it as a success versus a failure. Example 3, I was a hands-on project leader on this one for a manufacturing company. The ask was to automate a manual process. So it was a big transformational initiative. McKinsey, Accenture, you name every consulting company was on there before even I joined. I was asked to execute, as simple as that. 2.5 years of project duration. I remember starting in June 2017, and it wrapped up in 2019. $4.2 million was spent on this initiative. However, number 4 over here, I'm saying the project was 1 year late. So in the IT world, we have this habit of thinking, hey, if we are late, the project was not successful. We didn't really achieve what we wanted to achieve. So that is not correct. It was a year late, true. There were quite a few reasons why the project had to be delayed. The customer experience, the technology challenges internally, the resource challenges, and it was a truly global initiative where we were rolling out SFDC really over NA, EMEA, Asia Pacific, China, South America, Australia included. So you name it. So the key over here was that we were able to communicate to our customer in advance. They knew and they understood the rationale behind why we were going to be late. And so everybody agreed, and we had a new timeline, and that's how I consider that project to be successful. Item D over here, another example, automate manual process. The same company, C and D are from the same company. A year and a half of initiative, $3 million was spent up. This has a different criteria which I have used. The tech work was completed. The IT folks who were working on developing the solution was ready, tested, and it was waiting to go live. Now the holdup was the actual content or the data itself, that was going to drive the entire solution. So IT folks can say, look, we completed our work is done, the project is a success. There's an argument in this industry these days is that no, if the solution can never be used, then it was not a successful project to begin with. So in my book, in my world, I would consider this initiative to be a failure. I'm in contact with this client even now. They're still working on the data, and their new go live date is supposed to be by end of this year. So just to give you guys an idea and how we consider it, or at least how I look at it from a success and a failure. So I gave you some kind of an example of what I consider a success and what I consider a failure. So what if the project was late? So what if we had quality issues? If the team did not meet, a delivery date was missed? So what? What if there was a cost overrun? So I have worked on initiative where the initial estimation on a project was $3 million. We have gone over by $1 million, $2 million, what have you. So the way I'm asking this question is that should not be the hurdle or be the all definition for saying the project was not successful. As a PM, if you're working in my team, and if I am leading and if I'm seeing others, I would be looking out for something that is I have defined in the next screen over here. Communication, communication, communication. And what I mean by that is, if you are the leader of the project, you are in sync with the team, the risks, the issues, the kind of challenges that the team is actually facing. And so what my expectation is that you are evaluating every day, every week, every 2 weeks, and being able to communicate to the audience and say, look, here are the hurdles that we are running into. Here are the risks, here are the mitigations approaches, and here is the implications to the overall timing and the quality, right? So if you can do this, what I have identified in this particular screen, then to me, that is a good practice from a project manager or a leader who is running a project, because the project leader isn't the individual who is doing all the work. It's a team. You could have a team of 80 individuals working on an initiative, globally diversified in Asia, Europe, Australia, US. They are developers that are sitting in different time zones. So my expectation is not that the individual who is a project manager should be really the one deciding what is going to drop or not. However, it is the role of the project lead to make sure that you have a way, a mechanic by which you are able to understand how you are going to be late and the reason for it and come up with a solution. So mitigation solution you have to come up with, that should be the ideal end goal of the project lead. All right, so success mindset criteria and the business cases. Here, this slide, the reason I divided up this way, I just wanted to show the team, or at least how I look at it, what I have seen in big organizations. There's a group of individuals within the tech world that their mindset is, hey, I'm creating a solution. It will have an impact on cost, time, scope, and quality. And that's all my world is going to be. That's how I'm going to look at whether a project was successful or not. However, it's a very different mindset on the other side of the eye, right? If I am the owner of the company, if I am an individual who is dealing with the rationale for why the business case was developed for building out a solution for automation, my goal is going to be a little bit different than what the IT folks are looking at it. Now, in this day and age, by the way, I have seen that the IT folks have also become much more inclined towards understanding the mindset of businesses and how it should be thought about when you're ruling out a solution. So it's encouraging. So the idea is I would not really go through every single item. I'm just here to identify this and what just to identify what the businesses are looking at when they are looking at initiatives. So earlier on the screen, I did say that you could be late by a year or 2 years. You could be overrun on cost by 3 million, 50%, whatever. It doesn't really matter. If your ROI is still intact, your net present value, IRR, these are all the ways to measure a success of a project that is defined up front. We would not really go through every single item over here, but it's something for you guys. If you are willing to learn or want to understand more about it, then you can always go back online and look at it. But this is just to give you an idea of how the two worlds, from a tech and the other half of the world, actually looks at it. I also thought that since I'm talking about the success of a project, I should just give you the basic definition, which we all hear about it. I'm sure you guys all have seen it. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, services, or a result. I added the words feature set over here because if you are in the whole world of Agile Scrum, you're always thinking about every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks, depending on how you have framed your sprints and what needs to be delivered. That's okay, nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, the whole argument between the regular methodology versus the Agile methodology is kind of silly. I don't believe in one or the other. It's more of a framework, and I don't really get hung up on which one you have to use. I have been on a team that was running 100% Agile. We delivered something that was absolutely useless. So it doesn't really help the argument that if you're Agile Scrum, suddenly everything is going to start working out great. And a project has a start date and an end date. The Agile world always has an argument about it. Well, we don't have an end date. It's only whenever we are ready with it. And that's actually wrong. Every 2-week sprint has a start date and an end date. Every 2 weeks has a number of user stories that you're defining it. So you're doing the same thing on the framework that has already been defined in the other methodologies of framework. Quick statistics, this may be a little bit older. I was doing some research for another company and I pulled it from there. We are told that 68% of all IT projects have failed, and that is based on the research by Gartner and Standish. And they had done some research with about 1,000 customers, and they had criteria of how they were wanting to define success versus a failure. Then the other statistics is from a CIO research company where they have identified that 43% of all projects actually fail. It's, again, just to give you guys an idea of that, there are quite a few projects that actually does not meet our end goal. Failures are associated to the triple constraints, at least from these statistics, and they were mainly talking in terms of cost, time, and quality. Also thought I would give you guys a little bit of which everybody here on this call and in this event, I'm sure you guys are all aware of it. This is just me kind of recapping this waterfall. When I talk about two frameworks, I'm talking about the initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing out, which is called the methodology, the classical waterfall methodology. And then we have the Agile Scrum world, where you go through sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and retrospective. All here, the goal of me having this identified is simply to say, look, the project success or a failure does not really rely on a framework. You can use any of those and you can still create a product or an outcome that is great and it actually meets the end goal of what you guys wanted to do. This screen over here just identifies what is it that we are delivering in the regular methodology, which applies the same in an Agile Scrum world. You're creating a charter, plan, schedule, design, architecture, solution, validation, test plans. You go through this rigorous approach of delivering a solution. When somebody is managing a project, I get asked this question a lot. When you're managing a project, what exactly are you managing? And in a single sentence, I've used the phrase risk. You are basically trying to manage risk, because once you have created a plan, a schedule, once you have a sprint identified, you have a team identified, you are not the one doing the actual work. Remember that. So the lower, if you can mitigate the risk and if you have a way to identify them, escalate them, and mitigate them, then I think you are doing 75% of what good project managers are able to do. There are various ways I personally have been able to communicate to an audience, teammates, stakeholders, leadership in how we are doing on a project, how we are doing on an initiative throughout, whether it's on a weekly basis, every 2 weeks, whatever the cadence it is that we had agreed upon up front. And this simply identifies heat map. You may be used to red, yellow, green, blue concept to identify 1 minute manager dashboards. And then I have a couple of options from an agile world where you can take down the sprint velocity and the charts as well. Earned value technique. Now, I don't know how many of you have done this, or the good news is there are very few organizations that actually do go through an earned value technique. And this really applies to big initiatives that is going to be running for 3 years or 5 years. And it does not really have to be only with an IT world. It could be the construction world. So we as a project manager, or at least I should say I, always say that if you are a project manager, your mindset, the way you approach on solving a problem, the way you want to execute things, you can actually do this in any industry. I can be in the real estate world and I can use the same concept. So it does not really only apply to an IT world. If you are from an IT world only, that's where you have done project management. You may not have seen quite a few of these things. But here, the only thing which I want to identify is that I have used the earned value concept. There's a way to estimate the value of work actually accomplished. So if you had an 8-year initiative, after 8 years, if you truly want to identify, hey, what was the value that we actually accomplished in 8 years versus what we had initially estimated. And there's a way to do it. I won't go through every single item. This is just for the audience to really, if you are into it, if you search for earned value technique, you should be able to receive all those acronyms and terms and the interpretation of how we read this. Using the previous slide itself, this one also kind of gives you the formula. And this is what I was saying, the earned value has a formula where you can identify the percentage complete times EAC. So if you were to look at EAC, the budget at completion, and so that's the whole idea in how you derive at an earned value. This may be too heavy for individuals who are not really into the minutia of deciding on a project framework up front and calculating it from the very beginning up until the very end. The good news is that very rarely an organization uses it. A manufacturing company I consulted with, they are the only ones which I have seen out of my 18 years of work experience having to use some of these formulas. Key performance indicator. I, as a project manager, again, like I said, I have used earned value. There are ways to identify your resources, whether how they are doing it. Is there a way to identify which is a weak link in a project team? There's always one. We don't have to say that everybody is great. I mean, there are resources that may not be really having the skills that is required for that initiative. Business case is another one which I personally use. Are we still the project and the initiative that we are doing, are we still on track to meet the end goal of what we had decided up front? And then quality, safety, and risk, which we discussed earlier on. Project managers, and this is for me simply to say, hey, if you are a project manager in my team, I'll be looking for things like communication, how you are communicating your health, and the problem solving skills, which I was discussing about it earlier about, hey, how do you mitigate when you run into a problem? So I have gone into organizations and I've tried to assess the maturity of an organization and how they are in terms of, or where they are in terms of a maturity. And there's a framework for that. Different organizations would use it differently. I can go in after meetings with individuals, after looking at how they are running a project, whether it's an agile, whether it's agile scrum, or whether it's a waterfall methodology, it doesn't really matter. But looking at how an organization or a team takes a concept and delivers a solution at the end, what is the process that they go through from A to Z? And there's a way for me to identify whether you are in an initial ad hoc phase, a stable phase, as a mature organization, whether you have it defined. So there are various ways of it. If you have ever worked with a bigger organization and you have seen a project management office, they are organizations like that, which I think have created the maturity to a well advanced level. Everything is accountable for, they understand the processes. Anybody who comes in new, they have a way to help them move up really quickly and understand the process on which they use for deploying a solution from end to end. This is just to give you a variance of how I look at and go through the whole maturity process, which is just a variation of the previous slide. In the ad hoc world, you'll see, hey, we have assigned a project manager, and that's what the thing is, the end of the game. And if you assign a project manager, it means that he or she will do a great job and hopefully everything will work out. But that's more of an ad hoc. Then the second stable phase is what I consider is that the team has a process, a framework to create a schedule, planning, doing analysis and reporting issues, risk, and mitigation approaches. The defined is when you have templates and methodologies and frameworks all assigned, you have different roles being played by specific team members rather than a project manager playing 3 different roles where he or she is an analyst and also a quality control individual. And then the managed aspect of it, very few organizations, to be honest with you. I mean, I have worked along the side of Accenture, PricewaterhouseCoopers, McKinsey, and I've seen them have some kind of maturity. But I'll tell you an interesting story that I did consulting at McKinsey. And I think even them internally, so McKinsey has 2 arms, right? The consulting arm and then the internal arm. And I was in the internal arm of the organization. They had asked me to come in to help them out with a project. And believe it or not, I mean, the internal team and how they were running a project, they have failed 3 times in rolling out a technology solution that was easy enough that anybody could have rolled out. And when I came to realization with my evaluation, I understood that their entire issue was around the resourcing of who they had hired as a third-party consulting company. So they used up 3 years of the time. They had to scrap the entire initiative, and then they redid that from scratch with a different team. And then, you know, if you are truly an advanced organization, then you are doing a lot of things up front before you actually approve a project, before you understand the ROI. You have a RAID concept within an organization. You have a team that is devoted, dedicated to actually running initiative from scratch. Now, this does not apply to every organization, every team member. They could be individuals running a product or creating a product in a garage, and they don't have to follow the process. So when you look at this presentation, think about it in terms of corporation and huge organizations and how do they implement or initiate their projects. I think that's truly what I had. I think I may have gone over a little bit. I'm sorry about that. Any questions that I can answer quickly?
No, I think we're very good with time. And as a project manager myself, I think I agreed and I could relate to a lot of the content that you shared today, Kash. I see one question from the audience. So Bimochan asks, what next if a project's MVP is a failure?
Yeah, so if failure in what sense though? So were you not able to complete all the MVP items or the feature set? If that's the case, then the agile world will tell you, or the mindset will tell you, let's just say you had 100 user stories that you wanted to do as an MVP, and you had an end date to go live October 31st, this random date. then the agile mindset will tell you that no, it's not a failure. If it takes you another 1 month, 1 week, or 3 months to do the remainder of the MVP because they are so critical, which is why to begin with they were supposed to be in the MVP, then you do that and then you roll out. Does that answer the question?
Bimochan, if you're in the audience, would you like to add on to your question?
Yep, it's a good question though. I mean, again, I just want to reiterate that the MVP world or the agile world will always look at that question and say, no, that's fine. If the MVP could not be accomplished by a certain end date, then we continue working on it, complete it, test it, and then deploy it.
Yeah, depends on what aspect is the failure. Is it the cost? Is it the schedule? Is it the
Exactly.
quality?
And I can make an assumption if it's the agile world, they're talking mainly about the feature set because they are more concerned about the end users and who is going to use it. So if there is a particular feature in it that user would not be able to use it, then they will say, hold on, we'll continue working on it for another week and then we'll deploy it.
All right. I have another question for you, Kash, and that is what is the benchmark for success? How do we decide on the benchmark of the success of a project?
It's a great question. So that's right up front, right? When I was talking about MVP, IRR, if you have identified, if you do due diligence before and upfront, before you start creating something, it could vary. It could vary if an ROI for a particular investment, if I'm doing $100 million into a project and my goal is to get $200 million out of it, then that becomes by benchmark, right? And now that is upfront. Now maybe during the project you have delayed it, you have run into more issues. Now that $100 million initial estimation has now become 125, then you are reducing the ROI that you had initially estimated. But yes, I think the question is really great because you have to define the success criteria upfront. And I'm not talking about the success criteria at a user story. So you are rolling out a project, you are rolling out a solution, you are rolling out a concept to an online solution. How do you consider that to be a successful initiative? So that definition has to be done up front rather than halfway through or at the very end. Question.
Another question that I have for you is, what are the things that might get in the way of success of a project? Any impediments that might hinder?
My examples where I have seen it's usually, it is never the framework. That argument, we can have a session where we can argue and debate about agile versus waterfall methodology. That's crap, that's bullshit, basically. It's my way of taking at it. But it comes down to really resources, the planning, expectation that you set up upfront. We work with quite a few offshore companies. Let me just give you a true and honest answer, right? And I work with offshore companies. Offshore companies will simply shake their head and say, yes, we are going to do what you are saying within 3 months. Right off the bat, I know that is wrong. That is a wrong answer because you have not even asked the questions. So you haven't even seen what we are asking. So for the McKinsey example, which I was giving you, was a classic example of that. An offshore company, I'll give you, they were from India, from my home country. And they had agreed upon delivering something that was not going to be a reality. And they simply agreed so that they could win the project. The client, and this is not to blame on the offshore third-party vendor. This is to blame on the client themselves. Their expectations heading up front is so bizarre sometimes that you have to understand the reality of it as well. So that's how I would answer that question.
I agree. Even the asking of questions doesn't end even till the day of the delivery sometimes. You're still asking questions to the client sometimes. So
absolutely. No, you're right. And they're asking up the questions up front to mitigate and understand, what is it that you're delivering. If you ask me, when will you be able to deliver an app that does A, B, and C? I can't come and say 1 week or 2 weeks. My answer should be, hey, look, here are certain initiatives which I have done before with a real example drawn, which has taken us 3 months to 6 months. However, for your initiative, I need to understand more. And so that expectation setting up front is very critical on any initiative, whether you're rolling out a digital solution or anything else on your project.
Right. So I see a question in the audience from Sudeep Shakya who asks suggestions for a developer or a tech lead to grow as a project manager.
Well, my question would be, what is the reason you want to become a project manager? Is there any particular reason why you want to translate? I'll give you a true example, maybe interesting for the audience to hear. So I worked with a friend, this is when I was living in Florida, and he was a techie software engineer, great resource with what he did. And he looked at me and other project managers and said, man, you have it very easy. Sonny, you're funny, you're laughing, you're enjoying. It seems like the project management work is technically easy. I said, no, behind the scene, we deal with a lot of stuff. Exactly. So he wanted to become a project manager. I helped him. I said, I talked to the owners of the company. It was a small business. And he did, and so his rationale, giving you, I'm not saying the guy asking the question right now is the reason why he's doing it. So when he transferred and became a project manager, he only did that for 3 months. And he said he's happy doing the software engineering aspect of it, designing, architecturing, and delivering the technology solution. He said, oh my God, behind the scene, I see how much crap you guys deal with the end customers, with the business owners. What is it that you're measuring on an everyday basis? How you were accused of things failing because, at the end of the day, you are leading. So now that was just an example. So I guess I should ask, you should ask the individual who asked the question, what is the reason you want to become a project manager? So if you're able to answer that question, then I can give you a more useful answer. But in terms of becoming a project manager, you have to understand some framework, methodologies, understand what a role of a project manager means, entails, what the leadership or the stakeholders would be looking at you from a project manager perspective. What is it that you're delivering and how comfortable you are? And then you're not comfortable is not even the right word. And then you should have a roadmap where you go through steps, classes, processes, and you can become by the way, I do know individuals in New York who used to be engineers and now they are a project manager and they have done very well.
I completely echo the sentiment because I've had friends who are developers here at Leapfrog and they, say it's easy being a project manager. And then when you're having those conversations while passing in the corridors and you tell them, this happened and I had to deal with this unexpected situation and my client was really angry. And then they realize that I don't really want to be a project manager. I want to be a solution architect. I want to be a technical lead. I don't really care for that side of the software delivery. I want to cater more towards building architecture and building infrastructure. That's the type of leadership I want to. So Sudeep, figure out why you may be thinking of pursuing project management, and maybe we can help you out after you have clarity on that.
Yeah, and you can reach out to me as well offline. I'm happy to help. I've helped a couple of individuals.
Where can people reach you at?
Look up my name online. I am on LinkedIn. If you search for my name, which I think you had it in your slide, you should be able to look me up. Add me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So I have one last question for you, Kash, and that is, which method is the best to adopt while carrying out cost estimation of a new project?
So I look at it, ROI is, sorry, repeat the question again, just to get the estimation is what you're saying?
Yeah. Which method is the best to adopt while carrying out cost estimation of a new project?
So I don't know if it's a defined method or not. So here's what I have done in all my projects, which I was in the construction or the manufacturing industry. It wasn't a predefined methodology, but yes, we had a spreadsheet with calculations. So once, and again, initially, I would never give out an estimation on a project without understanding the scope to some extent, being able to identify what kind of resources are needed. If I need 2 architects, 3 architects, 2 analysts, 8 developers, right? So that's where your cost comes from. And this is me talking in terms of an agency working for an end client. But I think the concept still applies even if you're working for a big organization. So understanding the scope, not every single element of it, but hold on to giving out a number and throwing out a number to your end client or stakeholders, because that's what gets you into trouble. So high level scope, I would have about 2 to 3 days. There was one organization where we would have a working session for almost 3 days. We go through every single item. We would have architects, solution engineers, developers, analysts in a room going through what we have understood from the client. And yes, the estimation we are throwing it out, we would not be in hours, it would be in weeks. So 3 weeks for this kind of an effort, 12 weeks for this kind of an effort, 8 weeks for this kind of an effort. Because and you're able to communicate that to your client. So for that, they are appreciative of you, that you know what you're trying to achieve over here. And the reason why we can't do it in hours is because we don't know enough, right? Once you understand user story level, once you understand the sprint planning and how they're going to be organized, that's when you're able to give the planning a little bit more robust estimation. But so the methodology, if you want to use the word methodologies upfront, you have to have enough working meetings, sessions with the team, understanding even the high level, have your end customer or the client in the room, maybe even before that, to ask follow-up questions on the requirements, and then actually be able to give estimation in weeks and months and even years. But be very clear with them is that as you go through the process of redefining or defining a little bit more details of the requirements, your adjustment could be, I mean, your estimation could be adjusted, right? So that once you get to the sprint level, and now you have defined that you're doing sprints for every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that's when the more clarity happens. But from an agency perspective, true example, I just did a proposal for Department of Education in New York City. In my proposal, they are rebuilding a student information system. There are other big companies which is actually doing the proposal. We submitted it about a week ago. Estimation is $33 million. But I was very upfront. I said $33 million because of the way the requirements are defined. We don't know anything about it more than what you have given us. And then they have also rules that we can't ask questions and answers unless and until they want us to have discussions with them. So I gave them this example, 3 years initiative, $33 million. And then we identified different kind of resources that would be required to build a customized solution, estimated number of weeks for each of the phases. And so we'll see what happens. But that's the beginning. Then you are able to make it more robust as you move ahead in the process. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I think there's never a straightforward answer to that.
I would agree with you. I mean, meetings, just never-ending meetings.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that concludes our final question for today. Thank you so much, Kash, for presenting all of your knowledge in project management. I'm pretty sure people in the audience really appreciate it. I really liked your content. So that was Kashif Heyat.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Founder of ZebraEdge Inc.
Thank you, guys. Have a good weekend.